We spent the last session working on composing a lead for our record, and with the lead now done, well, at least composed anyway, I mean, we haven't synthesized it yet. What I want to do is I want to move on to composing a bass line to suit this lead melody we've got. Or actually, I should say bass lines to suit this lead melody. You see, typically, dance music tends to rely on a single bass line, and I suppose in a lot of respects, you'd expect a genre such as this, with such a high, energetic, melodic lead, to also use a single bass line. And that actually used to always be the case. The bass line was constructed from little more than an eighth offbeat, just following the pitch of the bottom line here. But what's happened over the years is the genre's evolved further, and it started to introduce more and more energy into its bottom end rhythm, its groove, and particularly in the bass rhythms. So much so that it's not unusual now for uplifting trance to use 2, 3, 4, even 5 bass lines, all that rhythmically counterplay with one another to produce the low end groove of the record. Now, I touched upon this rhythmical counterplay in the previous session, where we also discussed motifs and pitch as well. And these all occur again with the bass lines too, but there's some subtle yet important differences when we start to employ this into a bass. I mean, in the last session we discussed that to create energy in our melody, what we fundamentally did was work to reduce the silence between the notes. Now, it's pretty obvious from there that there was only so far we could go before we had to introduce some counterplay. I mean, if we were to just place these counterplay notes in here, along here, I mean, we'd end up just with loads of notes on the same pitch. We'd lose the rhythm, and basically we'd end up with a confused mess. It would just sound like a constant tapping of notes. Now, what we did is we introduced counterplay by changing the colour of the sound, the timbre, by moving these more than an octave away, more than the 2-to-1 ratio away. We created more interest in the main melody. The different pitches produced this rhythmical counterplay, and this made the melody a lot more interesting to listen to. What I'll do, I'll show you what I mean, because this is important that you understand this. So I'm going to mute these out now, and I'm just going to play this back, and then when it reaches the end I'll bring these back in and you'll hear what a difference it can make. You can hear there it makes a massive difference to this melody. It creates more of a groove. It flows it along a little bit better. And this type of counterplay is even more important when we start working with the bass, because the bass and the drums determine our main groove. I mean, dance music's formed around grooves, so we need to ensure that we've got a good low-end groove to back up the energy of this energetic lead. And what that means is that when we come to approach a bass, we want to use all the same principles, those same mechanics that we spoke about in the previous session, but put a slight twist on them. You see, we could just sit here and write a fast-pacing bass line and then change pitch to maintain the interest, like we did in our melody here, but to be honest, it doesn't work as well for the bass, and you'll find that you can actually produce much better results and improve the groove of the record if you use 2 different bass timbres to create this counterplay. Because then what you have is you have these 2 different basses that harmonically weave and interplay not only with one another, but with programs so they also interweave with melody. And when we do something like this, it's referred to as harmonic impulsing or harmonic binding. Now, that's the basic theory. But what I want to do now is I want to show you how it works in practice. Now, generally, I mean, experienced artists, they tend to do this without noticing. It just comes naturally to a musician as you experiment. But being as this is a DVD about writing uplifting trance, what I want to do is, like with the lead melody, I want to strip this down to its bare mechanics and show you how it works on a very fundamental level. But as I tried to explain with the melody, don't just do what I do. Don't just take the mechanics and think that's how I do it, because you've got to put your own creativity in there. If you don't, you're going to end up with something sounding a little bit too robotic. So I'm going to show you how this impulsing works now. But it is an incredibly convoluted theory, and to discuss all the options here, it'll take the entire DVD. So I want you to understand that this is just going to be an abridged version, specifically for writing uplifting trance. If we want to talk about harmonic impulsing when using dance music, I could go on forever. We may even do a DVD on impulsing basses for different genres of music. But what we do is, when we want to create it with trance, we want to create an impulse between the bass and the lead melody. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to emulate the highest pitched motif with the lowest pitched instrument. And what that basically means is we want our low bass to play the same motif that we program for the high melody. So I'll show you what I mean by that. What we'll do is we'll copy our melody down to our bass track there. And I'll just ensure that I am selecting that so I'm not editing the main lead. Delete that. I'm just going to run in and delete all those. Hang on a minute. A bit more complicated because we've got to keep that center one there as well. And get rid of those. Get rid of those. That. That. And I just want to set all these to the same pitch just for the moment. And obviously I want to take this. Probably best about there, I'd say. Select that track so I can call that up. Move it over there for now. Rewind that to the beginning. Right, now what we don't want this bass line copying the top line exactly in pitch. What we basically want to do with our bass here is just copy the motif. So what we need to do is, if I play this back now, it's going to sound horrible because there's no pitch movement in, and we've got pitch movement in there. So what we need to do is we need to add some pitch movements to this, and basically what we want to do, we want to emulate how this moves. We know that the first bar is in one note, the second bar is in another note, then the third and fourth are in another note. So we want to do the same here. We want to say first bar in one note, and we'll keep that in D, obviously there. Second bar to another note, and then third and fourth to another note, and then we'll repeat it there. There's no rules to what keys we go to here. We do want to avoid following that. We don't want to move down like that has. What we can do, I'm thinking here, is we could actually move from there, and that moves down to an A. So we could go D, A up there, then G. Then we're following that, but we're not going down. We're moving up. We're kind of doing an oblique motion. So let's try that. Rather than moving down to the A, we'll move up to the A. And then this went to the G, I think. Was it? Just let me verify that. We did go to a G. So we're kind of moving in a different motion for our bass there. So instead of going D, A, G, we're going D, A, G. Slightly different motion. Again, we'll move that up to an A. That's a G there. We'll just try that now. Just play that back. I mean, it's not the right sound there, but what we've basically done there is our first bass line is now playing the exact same motif as the top line of our melody. And what we do by that is we immediately create a strong rhythmical counterplay, a harmonic impulse between the top line of our melody and the lowest note, our bass of our music. Now, this type of impulse is important because what it does is it characterises the record with our listening audience, our clubbers. I don't want to go too much into that now because, as I said, this is a complex theory. So I'll go into that a bit more in a moment. What I want to do is I just want you to stick with me and you begin to understand how all this starts to take shape. As I say, it's a difficult theory to explain. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce a second bass line now. And after I've worked on this second bass line, I'll explain how and why we've done what we've done. So hopefully you've understood that there, that we've just emulated the motif, not the pitch, the motif of our top line there. So I'll copy this down. Now this second bass line wants to be an octave higher. So I just want to delete all that. And we'll go from there. And I'll move that to there. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to change this to a square. I just want to change that to a square for now, so we've got a slightly different sound between the two, because this is what harmonic impulsing is about. It's about having different sounds. So obviously we don't use the same bass sound there and there. I'm just doing it very roughly there by switching from as we did there. I'll move that back to a saw then. I'll actually move this one to a square there. Right, with this an octave high now, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to create an octave shifting bass. In other words, I'm going to create a bass line that now jumps octave from say D3 there. Let's go jump up to D4 there. You know, so we get that. So then I'll just turn that down a little. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mute our main melody and I'm going to listen to this bass here, and I'm now going to kick these notes around so they kind of occur on and in between the notes we have here. In many respects, I'm doing the same as I did with our melody here. Remember when we wrote our motif here and then we did the counterplay and we made these occur in between our notes here? I'm going to do the same between these two basses now. So just bear with me while I just have a bit of a play around. I've just got to listen to this. You don't want to be exact here. You don't want to kind of look at that and then move them in between. You just want to listen out. It doesn't matter if the odd note is replicated in there from here. Listen. It's not how it looks, it's how it sounds. So I'm going to start by playing this back and then just kick this first bar around. I'll just set that to there. Go too complex with this rhythm here. I suppose we could just copy that, really, couldn't we? Not the perfect sound for that, so I hope you can bear with me here. And all we want to do now is we'll just copy these across our 4 bars. bar 2, bar 3, bar 4. And then we'll just copy how this moved. What do we moved up to an A and then to the G. So we'll just do the same here. We'll move this up to an A there. And this up to a G. There. Then what we'll do is we'll cut that and we'll just repeat it. Get rid of that. And we'll just repeat that over there. Set that to there, and actually I'll glue them together. Just bear with me while I just play with the sequencer. Oops, on that on a pencil tool. And there we go, so let's just have a quick listen to that now. And I'll just introduce the melody into there as well. Now, admittedly, the sounds there are all wrong, but I hope you've got the idea there. It's the composition that matters at the moment. We will work on these sounds in a short while. Now, I suspect some of you are sat there watching this and thinking, what the just gone on here? So what I'm going to do, I'm now going to try and explain how it's all worked together and how we work to create some rhythmical counterplay in our basses and our melody. First of all, you can generally say that the highest pitch of any melody is going to have the biggest influence on our listeners. If you think about it, it's what you tend to whistle to in pop records. You listen to that high melody, the melody that plays along, that's what you'll whistle to. Now, what we did is we took that high melody, or at least the motif of the high melody, and turned it into our lowest bass. Now that, as I've already discussed, is a technique sometimes called harmonic impulsing, and what that does is it serves a number of functions. Now, firstly, no trance record starts with the melody. It starts by defining the groove, and then later in the arrangement we introduce the main melody. We'll see this take shape as we move into an arrangement if we get there on this. But we already know, or at least I hope you know, that the trance records, they work by starting off with the groove and getting everyone dancing to the groove, and then the melody filters in later in the record. And what we've done is, by taking the motif of the top line of our melody, the most memorable part of our record so far, and playing it at the beginning when we're defining the groove of the record, what we're actually doing is we're subconsciously imprinting the melody's motif into the listeners before the melody even comes in. So whilst they're there getting down to our bass groove, unknown to them, we're also imprinting the motif of our melody into their heads. So much so that when we evolve into the main melody later on in the record, it sounds completely natural, but it also triggers a higher emotional response because they have that feeling of familiarity with the record. Now, secondly, by using the motif as the low bass line of our dual bass, what we do is we also have a high-low relationship to create an impulse. Essentially, the bass plays the motif low in the range, and the melody plays the same motif high in the range, and both of these work together to create this harmonic impulse. Now, I don't want to go too far off topic here, but great pop records work in much the same manner. They work to imprint the melody into your head. A common example of this could be, say, you have the lead vocalist singing a chorus line, and then you'll find that if you listen closely, this is then mirrored afterwards by an instrument playing that exact same line. And then later in the record, that's mirrored again by another instrument playing that exact same line. They're all very subtle ways of imprinting a specific melody or motif into your head. And if that melody's good enough, you won't be able to get it out of your head. And that's what uplifting trance relies upon. It needs that uplifting, memorable motif to get your audience really excited. We're doing the same type of trick as pop here. We're subconsciously implanting the motif of the melody into our listeners through the bass groove. Now, of course, this doesn't occur in all uplifting trance records. I must stress that. It isn't a rule. There aren't any rules in music. But you will find that the most popular, best-selling, the best trance records, the one that really get people up on the floor, they employ this tactic. Sometimes it may be a little bit more subtle, sometimes it's a bit more obvious, but they do employ this kind of tactic. And then what we have is we have our second bass line of our dual bass system. And what we've done is we basically employed that to give the record pace, speed, energy by interplaying this with our impulse bass. So if you imagine our lead there, we did our motif there, our memorable motif, and then we counterplayed it there to make it interesting. We've done the same with our bass. We've done our motif by emulating this motif, and then we've counterplayed it with a bass there. And what this has done is it's added extra energy to the bass, and because we've jumped pitch as well, it's added even more energy. So we just, by pushing these notes around so they occur in between these, and sometimes on, but usually in between, and creating this different pitch here, we've created this further energy, this further push to the rhythm that you can hear when we play that back. And the thing is, if we take this melody away now, I know the sounds are right, but you've got to be able to hear it without the sounds for the moment. We've got a powerful groove going there. And when we do bring in our lead, it doesn't sound out of place, it just seems to uplift it and add more power to the record. I mean, as I say, the sounds aren't quite right, but I hope you're getting the impression of how this works, how we can interplay and we impulse to make the record groove along, but also give it the sense of familiarity as we build up. Now, you do have to be careful when using this technique. It's certainly not something you want to employ in every instrument. The trick with introducing this type of impulse and energy is to use it sparingly. You've got to keep in mind that music and, well, pretty much everything really, it works on contrast. It's our nature to compare one thing to another so we can form this basic judgment. For example, I mean, my coffee, wherever it's gone, my coffee here, I only know this is good coffee because I have to compare it to the crap that we drink in A&R when we go in their offices. And the same sort of thing applies to music. For example, if we have nothing more than a bass playing, we wouldn't know if it's particularly energetic or not because there's no other instruments to compare it with. If, though, we introduce, say, a chord progression in here, we could then compare the bass to the chords, and then the bass may come across as more energetic. And the big thing here, you see, is that if we slow down the chord progression further, we could actually make the bass appear more energetic, even though we don't actually touch the bass. Now, that's an incredibly, incredibly important aspect of dance music production. It's this comparison. The power of dance music comes from this comparison from one part to another part. So when you look to introduce any interplay, the counterplay, the impulsing, think about where and how you're applying it. If you apply it to every instrument, you're going to lose all contrast, and the music's going to sound... It'll sound wrong, it'll sound too forced. So when you do employ it carefully, and don't just use the mechanics, as I've said before. Don't just jump in and use the mechanics that I've used here. Inject your creativity into it. you have to use your creativity to give it a bit of extra life. If you just use the basic mechanics, you're going to come out with something that sounds rather static and horrible. And on that point as well, I don't want you to move on to the next session just yet. You see, our minds take time to absorb information, and we're bombarded with it every day. It's the reason why people choose to go out and live in the middle of nowhere with no stimuli whatsoever. It gives the mind time to absorb this information. So rather than feeling the need to take notes, if you watch one session a day, you'll find that your mind will absorb this information easier than if you try to cram it all in one session. So, as I say, watch this session again if you need to. Give it a few hours, watch this again, and then wait till tomorrow, and then come back tomorrow. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at programming some drums for this track. We'll get some proper sounding drum rhythms down. Or we may work on this bass, I don't know yet. I'm going to have a break myself, and we'll come back, listen to it again, and see what we think we should work on next.